Hey guys. Tonight, we begin not with the clash of swords or the politics of kings, but with the quiet, imposing presence of a stone wall and the faint, echoing sound of a distant chant. But before we step through that gate, let's pause for a moment in our own world. A world of ceaseless notifications, of ever-glowing screens, of noise that follows us from the street into our homes and onto the internet. We live in a symphony of distraction. Silence, for us, is often a vacuum to be filled, with music, with a podcast, with the restless chatter of our own thoughts. Now, I want you to imagine a different kind of silence. A silence that isn't an absence, but a presence. A silence that is dense, tangible, and cultivated, protected like a treasure. That is the silence we seek tonight. We are journeying to a place where stillness is not a void, but a language of its own. A place where a life is measured not in achievements or possessions, but in the rhythm of a chapel bell and the depth of a prayer. We are going to listen to the story of the women who lived a life sealed by vows, the nuns of the Middle Ages. Theirs was a life of quiet devotion, prayer, and labor, but it was also a surprisingly complex world of ambition, knowledge, and a unique, subtle form of power. It was the ultimate trade-off, to surrender the freedom of the body for a rare freedom of the mind. So, take a deep breath. Imagine the scent of old beeswax and cool incense hanging in the air. Feel the chill of stone walls that have stood for centuries, watching the world change outside. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world of a medieval nun was, by its very definition, an enclosure. A life lived apart. But the wall that separated the convent from the world outside was a permeable membrane, and the forces of that world were precisely what propelled women toward it. And so, as we stand before this imposing gate, we must ask, who were the women who crossed this threshold, and what powerful currents in their own lives brought them to this point of no return? For the path to God was rarely a straight one, more often, it was a winding road paved with a mixture of piety, pragmatism, and politics. Perhaps, for you, there was no choice at all. Imagine your first memory is not of a mother's embrace in a warm family home, but of tall, cold stone corridors and the echoing sound of women chanting in a language you did not yet understand. You were an oblate child given to God by your family, perhaps as young as 5 or 7 years old. You weren't asked, you were donated. This could have been an act of supreme piety by your parents, a promise made to God in a moment of desperation or gratitude. Perhaps they had prayed for a son and heir, and when he was finally born, they fulfilled their vow by giving their next child, you, to the church. For your family, it was a spiritual investment, an offering to secure their place in heaven. For you, it was simply life. You grew up knowing no other world. The abbess was the only mother you truly knew, the other nuns were your sisters, aunts, and teachers. The tolling of the bell was not an interruption, but the natural rhythm of your day, as reliable as the rising sun. You learned your letters by tracing the ornate script of holy texts, and you learned of the world through stories of saints, martyrs, and angels. The concepts of marriage, property, and worldly ambition were as abstract to you as fairy tales. You had nothing to sacrifice because you had never owned anything. Your hair had always been kept short, your clothes always made of rough, plain wool. This was not a prison, this was your home, a place of profound safety and order. But sometimes, on a clear night, as you looked through the narrow arch of your dormitory window at the vast, silent field of stars, did a flicker of curiosity about the world you never knew stir within you? A quiet wonder about the life unlived? Or perhaps your story was not one of such sheltered innocence, but one of cold, hard arithmetic. Imagine you know the outside world all too well. You are 16, the fourth daughter of a minor baron. Your father, in his own way, loves you, but his affection cannot change the ledger books. Your eldest sister's marriage was a grand affair, a strategic alliance that secured a political bond and came with a dowry that cost your father a significant portion of his wealth. Your second sister was also married off, her dowry smaller, but still a drain on the family's resources. Your brother, of course, as the sole male heir, stands to inherit everything. And then there is you. The family coffers are running low. Your dowry, such as it is, could only secure you a match with a landless knight or a steward, a marriage considered beneath your station, an embarrassment to the family name. So your parents sit you down. They speak of the honor of becoming a bride of Christ. They praise the serenity of the monastic life, the nobility of a life of prayer. They do not speak of the finances. They do not mention that the gift required to secure your place in a respectable convent, while substantial, is a mere fraction of the cost of a suitable dowry. It is a decision that is both pious and profoundly practical. It's the medieval equivalent of a family being able to afford an elite private university for the first two children, but realizing a good state school is the only sensible option for the third and fourth. Except this is a school from which you can never graduate. You might weep. You might protest. But obedience to your father is a daughter's sacred duty. And so you enter the convent not with a heart full of faith, but with a quiet sense of resignation. You carry with you the memories of village festivals, of the stolen glances of young men at mass, of the simple worldly life you were meant to have. Your great challenge will not be learning the Latin chants, but extinguishing the smoldering embers of resentment, and trying to find meaning in a fate that was chosen for you. Yet we must not become so cynical as to believe every woman was an unwilling conscript. For many, the call was genuine, a pull so powerful it eclipsed all worldly concerns. Imagine, instead, that you are a young woman of profound and simple faith. The world, to you, is a place saturated with the divine and the demonic. You see the fragility of life everywhere, in the sickness that carries off a neighbor, in the infant mortality that is a constant, heartbreaking presence. You listen to the parish priest preach of the very real torments of hellfire and the eternal, radiant glory of heaven. These are not metaphors, they are destinations. The secular world, with its frantic grasping for wealth, status, and fleshly pleasure, seems to you a beautiful, intricate trap laid by Satan. Marriage, childbirth, household management, it all seems so fleeting, so fraught with pain and peril. The only true, lasting love is the love for God. You see the nuns at prayer, their faces serene, their posture dignified, and you see your ideal. A life that is an unending conversation with God seems the highest possible calling. You yearn to purify your soul, to devote every waking moment to its salvation. Your family might be proud of your piety, or they might be disappointed, having already planned a marriage for you. But the call from within is too strong to ignore. You do not walk toward the convent as a sacrifice, but as a homecoming. Giving up the world is not a loss, but a liberation from distraction, allowing you to focus on the only thing that has ever truly mattered, the state of your immortal soul. Then again, perhaps your story begins after a worldly life has already been lived and lost. Imagine you were married, and for 15 years you were the lady of a small manor. You managed servants, bore children, and understood the complexities of running an estate. But your husband fell in battle, and a cruel fever took your children soon after. At the age of 35, you are suddenly a widow. A propertied widow. And in this world, that makes you a prize, pawn, and a target. Your late husband's brother begins to make suggestions of marriage, his eyes clearly on your land. A neighboring lord sees your estate as a convenient addition to his own and begins to apply pressure. The king himself might decide to grant your hand, and your lands, to one of his favored knights as a reward for service. Your autonomy is an illusion. You are vulnerable, a ship without a rudder in a sea of ambitious men. The convent, in this light, appears not as a retreat, but as a fortress. By taking the veil and making a sizable donation of your lands to a powerful abbey, you place yourself and your remaining wealth under the protection of the Church. You become a bride of Christ, and no mortal man can force you into marriage. You enter not with the wide-eyed innocence of a girl, but with the shrewd wisdom of a woman who has seen the world for what it is. You bring your skills in management, your understanding of politics, and a network of contacts. Women like you do not simply disappear behind the walls, they often rise to positions of great authority, becoming the cellarer, the treasuress, or even the abbess herself. For you, the convent is not an end to your power. It is the beginning of a new, more durable kind of influence, played by a different set of rules. And finally, imagine one more path. You are the daughter of a wealthy merchant or a physician, a man of learning who, in a stroke of progressive generosity, allowed you to study alongside your brothers. You have tasted knowledge. You can read Latin. You have been captivated by the logic of Aristotle and the beauty of Ovid. The world of ideas has opened up to you, and you feel an insatiable hunger to learn more. But society has other plans. A suitable marriage has been arranged. Your future, you are told, is in managing a household, overseeing the kitchens, and bearing heirs. Your books will be replaced with account ledgers. Your philosophical debates will be replaced with discussions about the price of wool. The thought fills you with a quiet dread. You look toward the convent and you see not a place of confinement, but the only library a woman can freely enter. You see the scriptorium, where knowledge is copied and preserved. You see the infirmary, where medicine is practiced. You hear tales of learned nuns who correspond with bishops and compose music. Your decision to join them baffles your family. Why would a beautiful, wealthy young woman wish to bury herself alive? But you are resolute. You are not driven by a desire for a heavenly husband, but by a very earthly thirst for knowledge. You are willing to accept the discipline, the prayer, the rough-spun habit, and the bland food, because it is the price of admission to the only intellectual life available to your gender. The vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience are, to you, the tuition for an priceless education. You are trading the freedom of the body for the freedom of the mind. And so, here you stand at the threshold, a collection of disparate souls, the sheltered child, the resentful daughter, the pious believer, the strategic widow, the ambitious scholar, all funneled by the great forces of medieval life toward this single, heavy gate. But regardless of the path that led you here, the journey that now begins within these walls is one of profound and methodical transformation. It is a process designed to unmake the person you once were, to strip away the identity forged in the outside world, and to build a new self in the image of humility, obedience, and divine love. This transformation is a long and arduous path, and it begins with the first, definitive step across the threshold, and a sound that will echo for the rest of your life, the sound of the heavy gate groaning shut behind you. That sound of the heavy gate groaning shut is the punctuation mark at the end of your old life. What follows is not an immediate, holy peace, but a period of profound disorientation. Your world, once measured by the vastness of the sky and the familiar paths of your village or town, has shrunk to the dimensions of the cloister, a square garden, open to the heavens but enclosed on all four sides by covered walkways, which lead to the church, the dormitory, the refectory, and the chapter house. This is your new universe. The first act of this new life is the systematic shedding of your old one. You are taken to a small room, and your fine clothes, perhaps silk, or dyed linen, the last physical remnants of your former status, are taken from you. In their place, you are given a simple, shapeless tunic of rough, undyed wool. It scratches your skin, a constant, irritating reminder of your new reality. And then comes the hair. Your long hair, for centuries a symbol of a woman's vanity and glory, is cut. Shears, cold and impersonal, snip away the locks you may have spent years cultivating. It is a deeply humbling moment, a visible severing of your connection to your past and your femininity as the world understands it. You see your reflection, and a stranger looks back, shorn and anonymous. You have become a blank slate, ready to be written upon. Before you can even begin to learn the intricate new rules, you must exist for a time in a state of limbo. This is the period of the postulant, a candidate seeking admission. For weeks, or even months, you are in the convent but not truly of it. You live on the periphery, a silent observer, tasked with the most menial of chores, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, weeding the garden, all while being watched. Every move you make, every reaction you have, is scrutinized by the older nuns. Do you complain? Do you show impatience? Do you weep with homesickness? It is a test of temperament, a probationary period designed to see if you have the basic fortitude for the life ahead. If you endure this period of observation with sufficient humility and perseverance, if the community decides you are suitable material, you may be accepted as a novice. And it is here that the true, methodical work begins. Your life is now placed into the hands of one of the most formidable figures in the convent, the novice mistress. She was a combination of boot camp drill sergeant, spiritual mentor, and human resources manager, whose primary key performance indicator was the complete dismantling of your ego. Her task was not to make you comfortable, but to break your worldly will and remold it in the shape of the community. She was your guide through the labyrinthine rules of monastic life, your harshest critic, and your sole confidant. Your first and most important textbook is the Rule of Saint Benedict. This is not a simple list of do's and don'ts, it is a complete operating system for a communal life, a 6th century document of profound psychological insight designed to minimize the bugs of human personality. You do not just read the rule, you begin to live it. You learn of the 12 degrees of humility, a ladder you must climb that begins with the fear of God and ends in a state of constant, unfeigned lowliness of heart. You learn the importance of stability, the vow that binds you to this specific community, in this specific place, for the rest of your life. There is no transferring to another convent if you don't like the food or find the abbess disagreeable. This is it. And above all, you learn the soul-crushing, soul-freeing discipline of obedience. You must obey the abbess, the novice mistress, and indeed any nun senior to you, instantly and without question, as if the command came from God Himself. For a person of intelligence and spirit, this is the highest and hardest mountain to climb. Alongside the rule, your mind is tasked with a feat of memorization that would seem staggering to us today. This is the Opus Dei, the work of God, the daily cycle of 8 prayer services that form the skeleton of your life. You must learn to chant. The music is the unearthly, monophonic melody of the Gregorian chant, a sound designed to elevate the soul and empty the mind. And you must learn the words. This means committing to memory the entire Psalter, all 150 psalms, along with countless hymns, antiphons, and responses, all in Latin. Your days are filled with recitation, your mind a constant spool of sacred text. This immense mental effort is itself a form of prayer, a way of so saturating your consciousness with the Word of God that there is little room left for worldly thoughts or selfish desires. And you learn the discipline of silence. You quickly realize that silence is not merely the absence of speech, it is the default state of being. Speech is a tool to be used sparingly, purposefully, and only with permission. There are designated times and places for speaking, but for most of the day, in the cloister, in the dormitory, in the refectory, a profound quiet reigns. This is the great silence. To communicate necessary information, many communities developed a sophisticated language of hand signals, a silent vocabulary for book, bread, fish, or I am sorry. This enforced quietude turns your attention inward. You become acutely aware of the ceaseless chatter of your own mind, the prideful thoughts, the petty grievances, the lingering daydreams. The silence outside forces you to confront the noise within, and that confrontation is a central battle of your new spiritual life. The entire novitiate is a year-long, or sometimes 2-year-long, test. The novice mistress is an expert at creating opportunities to challenge your pride. She might praise the embroidery of another novice while ignoring your own superior work. She may assign you a task you find demeaning, like cleaning the latrines, simply to watch your reaction. You may be corrected publicly in the daily chapter meeting for a tiny infraction, a dropped book, a moment of drowsiness during the midnight service. These are not acts of personal cruelty, but calculated spiritual exercises. Each one is a small chisel, chipping away at the marble of your ego, trying to find the humble, obedient servant of God within. Many novices do not make it. They find the life too hard, the discipline too severe. They are quietly counseled to leave and return to the world, their dowry gift returned to their family. There is no shame in this. It is better to leave as a novice than to live as a miserable and resentful nun. But if you endure, if you bend without breaking, if you find in the relentless routine not a prison but a strange and powerful freedom, then the day arrives for the final, irrevocable step. The ceremony of your perpetual profession is the most important day of your life, a piece of profound spiritual theater. You enter the church dressed not as a novice, but as a bride, often in a fine white gown, a final, poignant nod to the worldly marriage you are forsaken. You are making a choice, marrying not a man, but Christ himself. During the ceremony, you read your vows aloud, the words you have written yourself on a piece of parchment, promising poverty, chastity, and obedience for the rest of your days. Then comes the most dramatic moment. You lay prostrate on the floor before the altar, your arms outstretched in the shape of the cross. A black funeral pall, the cloth used to cover a coffin, is spread over your entire body. To the world, you are now dead. Your family, watching from the congregation, weeps as if for a burial. When the pall is removed, you rise. You have been reborn. You are stripped of your bridal gown and clothed, for the first time, in the black habit of a professed nun. A black veil is placed over your head, obscuring your face, a symbol that you are now hidden from the world. A ring is placed on your finger, a wedding band sealing your mystical marriage to Christ. You may even be given a new name, a final severance from your old identity. You are no longer Marguerite, the daughter of a baron, or Isabella, the merchant's child. You are now Sister Agnes, or Sister Claire. You sign the parchment with your vows and place it upon the altar, a binding, eternal contract between you and God. And with that final act, the transformation is complete. You have passed through the fire, and have emerged as something new. The life you have chosen, or that was chosen for you, is now truly yours, forever. And now, the real work, the day in, day out living of that vow until death, begins. The rhythm of the bells takes over, no longer a strange and demanding schedule, but the very pulse of your new existence. But a vow is not a single moment of high drama, it is a promise lived out in 10,000 ordinary, dramatic moments. The grand theatre of your profession ceremony gives way to the quiet prose of daily life. That new name, that black veil, that golden ring, they are not trophies of a finished race, but the uniform and tools for a marathon that will last the rest of your days. Your new existence is governed by a force more powerful than the sun or the seasons, the horarium, the sacred timetable of the monastic day. It is a relentless, divinely ordered machine, and you are now one of its intricate, living gears. Your day begins in what is not merely the night, but the very heart of it. Long before the first hint of dawn, a bell rings out in the pitch-black cold. It might be 2 o'clock in the morning. This is the call to the night office, or vigils, later known as matins. You wake instantly. You have learned to do this without thought. There is no snooze button in the 13th century. You rise from your simple straw mattress in the communal dormitory, a long hall filled with the quiet breathing of your sisters. In the profound cold of a stone building in winter, your breath mists in front of you. You dress quickly and silently in the dark, your woolen habit a familiar weight on your shoulders, and join the silent procession of shadows moving along the cloister walk toward the church. The chapel is vast and dark, lit only by a few flickering candles on the altar. The air is heavy with the scent of cold stone and lingering incense. This is not a gentle, welcoming prayer. This is a battle. A battle against sleep, a battle against the cold, a battle to focus your groggy mind on the glory of God while the rest of the world is lost in dreams. For the next 2 hours, you and your sisters will chant and recite the Psalms. Your voices join together, a single thread of sound weaving through the immense darkness, constant vigil keeping watch over a sleeping world. You are spiritual sentinels on the ramparts of the night. As the service of matins flows into the next, Lord's, the prayer of praise at the first hint of dawn, you may see the deep blue of the sky begin to pale through the high stained glass windows. You have prayed the night away. After Lord's, there might be a brief period for private prayer or reading as true dawn breaks, before the bell rings again for prime, the first hour of the day, around 6 o'clock. Following this service, the community files into the chapter house for the daily meeting. If the prayer services are the soul of the convent, the chapter meeting is its pragmatic, administrative brain. Here, seated on stone benches around the room, you listen as the abbess or prioress assigns the day's labors. But first comes the ritual of public confession. One by one, sisters may rise and accuse themselves of minor infractions against the rule, a moment of gossip, a prideful thought, a lack of attention during prayer, an accidental breaking of a dish. It is a moment of ritualized humility, a way to smooth over the tiny frictions of communal life before they can become resentments. It was a spiritual version of a corporate, daily stand-up meeting, combined with a peer review session where the goal was collective, not individual, success. With the day's work assigned and sins absolved, another bell signals the start of the main labor period of the morning, a block of time that will stretch for several hours. Ora et labora, prayer and work, is the engine of your life. Depending on your skills, or seniority, and your assigned role, you now disperse to become a part of the convent's complex economic and cultural enterprise. Perhaps you move to the scriptorium, one of the most important rooms in the entire abbey. The air here smells of ink, animal hide, and melting wax. This is the intellectual factory of the Middle Ages. Your task is to copy manuscripts. You sit for hours on a hard wooden bench, your back aching, a large, prepared sheet of vellum, made from stretched and scraped calf or sheep skin, spread before you. You work in silence, your world reduced to the tip of your goosequill pen and the words on the master text you are copying. The work is painstaking. One mistake can ruin an entire page, a costly error when a single sheet of vellum represents a significant expense. For 4 hours, you might copy only a single page. But what you are doing is sacred. You are preserving the Word of God, the commentaries of the Church Fathers, or even the works of classical authors like Virgil or Cicero. You are a living conduit for the knowledge of the past, ensuring its survival into the future. Around you, other nuns perform specialized tasks. One prepares the vellum, another mixes the ink from oak galls and iron salts, while a skilled artist, the illuminator, adds vibrant, jewel-like illustrations and gold leaf to the most precious volumes. A single finished book is a work of art, a treasure worth more than a small farm. Or maybe your path leads you not to a desk, but to the infirmary garden. Here, under the open sky, you cultivate neat rows of herbs. You know them all by name and by use: lavender to calm a feverish patient, comfrey to help knit broken bones, chamomile for sleep, St. John's wort for melancholy. You are the convent's healer. You tend to the sick among your sisters, but your skills are also a vital service to the surrounding community. Peasants from the local village will come to the convent gate, seeking relief from their ailments, and it is you who prepares the poultices, tinctures, and salves. It is a life of practical science and deep compassion, each healing act a prayer in itself. Perhaps you are the almoner. Your station is at a small window or gate that faces the outside world. You are the point of contact between the enclosure and the poor. It is your job to distribute the convent's charity, loaves of bread from the bakery, leftover food from the refectory, old clothes, and small coins. You see the faces of poverty and desperation up close, and your work is a constant reminder of the world's suffering and the convent's duty to alleviate it. Or maybe your work is in the vast embroidery workshop, your needle flashing as you stitch intricate scenes from the lives of saints onto silk vestments for the priests, your fine motor skills and artistic sense creating objects of breathtaking beauty for the glory of God. Just as you find a rhythm in your work, your mind focused, your hands moving with practiced ease, another bell cuts through the air. It is the call to sext, the midday prayer, and then to the main meal of the day. You down your tools, wash your hands, and file into the refectory, a long, high-ceilinged hall. The meal is eaten in absolute silence. As you consume your simple food, typically a thick vegetable and grain soup called pottage, dark bread, and perhaps some cheese or an egg, washed down with weak ale or watered wine, one sister, the lector, stands at a pulpit and reads aloud. The reading is from the Bible, or the life of a saint, or the writings of a church father. You eat with your ears as much as with your mouth. The silence prevents idle chatter and forces you to focus on the nourishment of your body and the spiritual nourishment of the holy words, making the very act of eating a form of meditation. After a short rest or a period of sacred reading, the afternoon brings another work session, though often shorter and less intensive than the mornings. The day begins to wind down as the sun lowers in the sky. The bell for Vespers, the evening prayer, calls you back to the church. This is one of the most beautiful services, sung as the daylight fades and the chapel is filled with the soft glow of candlelight. The atmosphere is one of gratitude and peaceful contemplation. As dusk settles into night, you gather one last time for the final elements of the day. There may be a light spiritual reading, called the collation. Then comes Compline, the night prayer. The chants and prayers of Compline are specifically chosen to ask for God's protection through the night, to guard against the terrors of the dark and the temptations of evil. It is a beautiful, calming, and final act of communal worship. When the last note of the Compline chant fades into the stone arches of the church, the great silence begins. From this moment until the chapter meeting after prime the next morning, absolute silence is the rule. It is forbidden to speak a single word. You walk in quiet procession back to the dormitory. There is no idle chatter, no whispered gossip. There is only the soft shuffle of feet and the shared, profound quiet of a community ending its day in unison. You slip into your bed, the simple prayers you recite now entirely within your own mind. You are tired, your body weary from labor and your mind filled with chant. You fall asleep in this ocean of silence, a peace born of discipline and structure, knowing that in just a few short hours, the bell will ring again in the darkness, and the sacred rhythm will begin once more. And in that sleep, you are an individual soul at rest, lost in the private darkness of your own mind. But when you wake to the bell, you wake as part of a complex, living organism, a society in miniature with its own hierarchies, its own economy, its own unwritten rules and silent power struggles. For the convent was never just a sanctuary for prayer, it was a formidable institution, a spiritual corporation. And every corporation needs a chief executive. At the absolute pinnacle of your world sits the abbess. She is far more than a spiritual mother. She is a feudal lord, a political player, and a CEO. An abbess, particularly of a large and ancient abbey, could be one of the most powerful women in the country. She controlled vast tracts of land, entire villages, forests, and farms. She sat as judge in her own courts, dispensed justice to the tenants on her lands, and managed revenues that would rival those of many a male baron. She negotiated with bishops, lords, and sometimes even kings. To be elected to such a position, a woman needed to be not only pious but also from a high-ranking noble family, politically astute, and a ruthlessly competent administrator. While you sleep in a communal dormitory, she often has her own private quarters, perhaps even a small staff. While you eat pottage in the refectory, her diet might be more varied, a necessity of her rank and the demands of entertaining important guests. She is the rock upon which the entire community is built, and her vow of obedience is owed to God alone. Beneath her, the community you live in is not the perfectly equal sisterhood you might imagine. A deep and often unbreachable class divide is built into its very structure. You, as a woman from a family that could provide a substantial dowry of money or land, are choir nun. You are literate. Your primary duty, your sacred charge, is the performance of the Opus Dei, the work of God. It is your voice that fills the chapel choir with chant 8 times a day. It is from your ranks that all the convent's officials are chosen, the prioress who is the abbess's second-in-command, the cellarer who manages the food and drink, the treasuress, the infirmarian, the novice mistress. Your dowry helped build the walls around you, and your literacy allows you to perform the convent's most prestigious work. But working alongside you, almost invisibly, the lay sisters. These women come from peasant or artisan families. They could not provide a monetary dowry, so they brought the dowry of their own bodies, a lifetime of physical labor. They are often illiterate. They do not participate in the full chanted office in the choir. They may have a simpler set of prayers to recite while they work. And their work is the hard, physical labor that keeps the convent running. They are in the kitchens, baking the bread and stirring the cauldrons. They are in the laundry, scrubbing the habits. They are in the fields and barns, tending the crops and livestock. They ensure that you, the choir nun, are free to pursue a life of prayer and study. It is a community of sisters, equal in the eyes of God, but not always in the eyes of each other. A subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, social wall exists within the physical one. Living within this stratified society, you begin to understand your three vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience in a new, more complex light. Your vow of personal poverty, for instance, is the very engine of the convent's corporate wealth. You own nothing, not the habit on your back, not the pen in your hand, not the bed you sleep on. All of it belongs to the community. This collective ownership, repeated across hundreds of monasteries and convents, meant that the church became one of the largest and wealthiest landowners in all of Europe. Your individual poverty, paradoxically, contributes to an immense institutional power. Your vow of chastity, too, takes on a social dimension. By renouncing marriage and motherhood, you and your sisters have effectively removed yourselves from the primary social function of women. You are not a wife, not a mother, not a daughter to be bartered in a marriage alliance. You belong to a unique third gender in medieval society, women operating outside the normal structures of kinship and male ownership. This gives you a strange and potent autonomy. Your primary allegiance is not to a husband or a family, but to your community and to God, allowing the convent to function as a self-contained female-led entity. And your vow of obedience, practiced daily, is what holds the entire intricate structure together. It ensures the smooth, unquestioning operation of the community, cementing the authority of the abbess and her officials. But it also plays out in the silent interactions between sisters, in the deference shown to seniority, in the acceptance of tasks you might find unpleasant. It is the spiritual lubricant that allows dozens or hundreds of strong-willed women to live together in a confined space for their entire lives with a surprising degree of harmony. It is within this world of choir nuns, of literacy, of time freed from manual toil, that the convent's most extraordinary legacy is forged. For the educated woman of the Middle Ages, the cloister was not a cage for the mind, but its only gymnasium. Here, and almost nowhere else, a woman's intellect could be cultivated, celebrated, and put to use. While most women in the world outside were denied access to higher learning, you and your literate sisters were surrounded by books. You were expected to read, to study, to contemplate the deepest theological questions. This unique environment produced some of the most remarkable minds of the age. Think of Hildegard of Bingen, a German abbess in the 12th century. She was not just a nun, she was a force of nature. A visionary mystic whose revelations were sanctioned by the Pope, she was also a brilliant musical composer whose chants are still performed today, a respected author of theological books, and a pioneering naturalist and physician who wrote texts on botany and medicine. She corresponded with and advised popes, emperors, and kings. She was, without exaggeration, one of the great intellectuals of her time, and her life would have been utterly impossible outside the cloister walls. Think of Hrotsvitha of Gandersheim in the 10th century, a canoness who wrote plays in the style of the Roman poet Terence, becoming the first known female playwright in the Western world. Think of Herad of Landsberg, an abbess who, in the 12th century, compiled the Hortus Deliciarum, or Garden of Delights, a vast encyclopedia of all knowledge of her time, complete with hundreds of intricate illustrations, intended for the education of the novices in her convent. These women were exceptional, but they grew from a soil that was uniquely fertile. The convent provided the resources, the time, and the intellectual community for female genius to flourish. And for some, it offered one more, unique avenue to power: mysticism. In a world where official religious authority was held exclusively by men, a powerful visionary experience could give a woman a direct line to God. Her words, received in a divine vision, could carry an authority that bypassed the entire male-dominated church hierarchy. It was a dangerous path. One could be celebrated as a mystic or condemned as a heretic, but it was a path some women walked with astonishing influence. And so, we come to the end of our journey. The life of a medieval nun was one of profound paradox. It was a life of confinement that offered a unique kind of freedom. It was a life of individual submission that created immense collective power. It was a life of silence that allowed for the creation of enduring works of literature, art, and music. These women were not the meek, passive figures of popular imagination. They were administrators, artists, scholars, scientists, and mystics. They were the silent keepers of knowledge, the quiet prayers at the heart of a chaotic world. Their lives, though enclosed, created a legacy of learning and female autonomy that echoed far beyond the stone walls of the cloister. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you can imagine that profound, textured silence. A quiet not of emptiness, but of purpose. A stillness that allowed for a different kind of life, a different way of being. And perhaps you can still hear, faintly, the echo of a distant chant, a timeless melody of devotion, discipline, and the enduring power of the human spirit.